Okay, I've started recording, so we can put this up for the people who aren't here today. I'm going to try to share my screen. Can y'all see my screen?
Yes, sir.
All right. Okay, we want 210, October 13th. Oh, this is the halfway week, huh? Okay. The Renaissance is marked by I mean, they didn't know at the time. It's not like you woke up and said, "Oh, I'm in the Renaissance." This was a term, I think, coined in the 19th century to describe the period. But there were some interesting breaks with the past. For one thing, as I point out here, there was the invention of the printing press, movable type printing press. So you could, instead of taking a year to make a copy of a book, you could make it in a few minutes. And dropping the labor costs so much meant that these printed books were much, much cheaper than the old-fashioned handwritten kind of books. And most people still couldn't afford very much in the way of books. They were still pretty expensive. But now you can, at least, especially in England, have a copy of the Bible if you wanted. And this led to a number of translations being made over the course of a century. Early on, they were suppressed, and eventually, once the government became Protestant, embraced. And that was another hallmark of the period, was Protestantism. This is the group of churches that broke away from the Roman Catholic Church. And while the Catholic Church preferred to mediate the scriptures through the priests, many of the Protestants emphasized reading the Bible for yourself, which you couldn't do when there's only one Bible in town and it's at the church. I guess you could do it, but it wasn't as likely. Now you could teach people to read and write, and many of them could actually afford their own copy or use a neighbor's copy. And so the Bible becomes the best-selling work in English pretty much perpetually. There's nothing that's ever going to outsell the Bible. Another thing that happens during the Renaissance, which means rebirth, looks like an Italian word to me, is this idea, or the advent of books that have been lost. Part of the tragedy of the Dark Ages was the fact that a lot of great material that had been kind of the basis of Western culture got lost, just overlooked. The only people copying books were at eventually when they got these nice fancy kingdoms, not the little hard scrabble tribes you see early on. Then you would have courtly writing at court, and that's where you get stuff like Landville, which is a tale of courtly love, right? But the church did the bulk of the writing early on, and if they didn't see a point in preserving something, then it went away. And they were just barely able to keep the thread of civilization alive, so stuff got lost. But with the fall of Constantinople in 1453 to the Ottoman Empire, I think some of these texts that had been lost started filtering west. And notice this is a happy coincidence because it's the same time that you start having printed material available. So just one example, there was this guy from Italy named Paggio who was going around Western Europe hunting lost books. And up in Germany, of all places, the barbarian location, he found De Rerum Natura, on the nature of things, by a guy named Lucretius. It hadn't been seen since ancient Rome. Lucretius was Roman, writing in Latin. I'm not sure if he was from Rome. But this is the only copy that survives, and suddenly, from not existing at all as far as anybody is concerned, you have an edition that's going all over Western Europe, because everybody who's educated can read Latin. And it started giving people new ideas about science. So the modern age didn't invent science. It was the ancient Greeks and Romans who were then rediscovered beginning in the Renaissance and moving forward, and kind of jump-started the modern scientific revolution. I mean, there's a kind of a lie out there that most people thought the earth was flat. At one time they did. But by the time of the Greek Enlightenment, they knew it was a sphere, and this guy named Eratosthenes actually measured the shadow cast by a stick several hundred miles apart on a given day, and using the different lengths of the shadow at that same moment, was able to figure out the circumference of the earth. So they even knew how big the earth was. It wasn't advanced like modern science, but it was a lot more advanced than what came between. And so the Renaissance was starting to rediscover this stuff. We consider Richard III to be the last medieval king. Now, the Tudors, who committed treason and killed him, paint this picture of him as a horrible tyrant. On the other hand, he is the last king who dies in battle. From this point on, it will generally be the king's job to lead from behind and eventually not lead at all. Nowadays, it's the prime minister who makes that kind of decision to go to war, and they definitely don't go out and fight on the front. But earlier on, the king was your king to lead in battle. Same thing with lords. Like a lord was there to lead a large number of forces. You get your dukes and your earls and your knights all together as a lord, and they all fight under you, and you're leading them. And this changed so much over the centuries that eventually, not that long ago, a new term was invented, warlord, which would have made no sense in Renaissance England, because every lord was a warlord. You were supposed to go out and fight in the front, or at least in medieval England. And it started changing in Renaissance England. So the War of the Roses was this civil war that just kind of ground on and on. Finally, Henry VII defeated Richard III in 1453, ending the war between the Lancasters and the Yorks. He was a Lancaster who married a York named Elizabeth, Richard's niece, I believe. And so he joined the two lines together and was able to end that civil war. They founded the Tudor dynasty, which lasts Henry VII, Henry VIII. What was Henry VIII's son's name? He didn't last very long. Could have just said monarchs. Okay. Edward VI, there you go. Then Lady Jane Grey. briefly ascends the throne. Mary, aka Bloody Mary, comes back in, and she Henry VIII had been Catholic until he had this unfortunate inability to father sons. He seems to have been maybe deficient in Y chromosomes. At any rate, he kept swapping out wives to try to find one that would give him a son. And the Catholic Church, because his wife was the sister of the, I guess it's the Holy Roman Emperor. And so he mattered more than Henry VIII. And so the Pope could not afford to give a divorce, or rather an annulment, which is what Henry wanted. So Henry broke away and moved the church into the Reformation, although not very much. He mostly kept it like it was under Catholicism. And from now on, you have this huge tug of war between the Catholics and the Protestants, and within the Protestants themselves, over how Protestant England is going to be. So Mary tries to yank the church, yank the country back into Catholicism. And by that time, the country does not want Catholicism. They kind of have a nationalistic identification with Protestantism. That's England Protestant, right? And so they call her Bloody Mary. Who's the guy up in, he's the Presbyterian up in, John Knox, yes, up in Scotland. He writes, "The first blast of the trumpet against the monstrous regiment of women." It's monstrous to let women rule. Monstrous, I say. But the Protestants maybe the whole country lucked out, because Mary died and forestalled the Civil War. Because Elizabeth, when she came in, was much friendlier to the Protestants and ruled. Her mother had also been, ally of the Protestants, so it kind of ran in her side of the family. Eventually we'll get a full-blown Civil War, but not during the Renaissance. It's in the next period, which we'll talk about later. Here are some matching terms. They make excellent matching questions on a test. So we're finally starting to read stuff that's written in English that we can read today, what we would call early modern English. Anglo-Saxon or Old English doesn't really look like English as we know it at all. Medieval English, you can limp along in it, but I prefer to use a translation so you don't spend all day and have no idea what you just read. But now we're actually reading poetry as it was written. In the Renaissance, these are things from the ancient world that get uncovered and worked over in Italy. Italy's Renaissance started, I don't know, a couple of hundred years before England's. England was a backwater. And so it was when the Tudors came in that they started importing some of this Italian Renaissance that they've been hearing about. Only they didn't call it a Renaissance. Anyway, carpe diem is Latin for seize the day. It means you have to live while you have the chance. Tempus fugit, tempus is time. Fugitive, flies, and that means time flies. So we don't have a lot of time here, and usually this is used to go on and say, therefore, carpe the diem. Memento mori. Memento is something that reminds you of something. It's a reminder, like I bought a memento in Seattle of the Space Needle. Well, if you fell off the Space Needle, that would be a memento mori, a reminder that you will die. Are we still recording? I cannot tell. Well, let's just, oh yes, I see the little record thing. Blazon is, I think, looks more like a French word to me, where you list several traits and describe them in detail. Your eyes, I like your eyes. They're really cool. Your eyes are popping, you might say today, with the rush of youth. But back then, you would say your eyes are like limpid pools. Your lips are like rubies, etc., etc. That's a blazon. And it only takes about 5 minutes of blazons to be really tired of blazons. Alliteration is beginning the word, the words all with the same letter. A ruby red rose rolled down the ridge. Ouch. That's bad, bad poetry. And an oxymoron. And we know what a moron is. It's somebody who's dull. It's the Greek word for dull. Oxy is the Greek word for sharp. And so an oxymoron is sharp, dull, or a contradiction in terms. Jumbo shrimp, burning cold, sophomore. Sophos is the Greek word for wise. Moron, oh yes, we know what moron is. So a sophomore is a wise fool. It's knowing just enough karate to get your ass kicked, is basically what they're saying. You need to learn more karate so that you don't get your ass kicked. My favorite combat move is running for the door, but that's a story for another day. All right, let's look at the Song of Solomon, which is our okay, so Song of Solomon is kind of an interesting book. It's the one book in the Bible that's all about sex and getting married and procreating, and really, you know, it's written from the perspective of these two lovers. He's way into her and she's way into him, and boy, they just love the blazon. And so it becomes a model for this kind of poetry. Now, biblical scholars didn't really know what to do with this stuff. So I have a Bible that's, you know, oh, this must be an allegory. They can't really be that horny in the Bible. And so it'll have something on Christ's love for the church. And then the next page, the church's passion for Christ. When you read it as an allegory, it's even, even more disturbing. But it did tie into a popular kind of poetry, which equates sexual ecstasy with religious fervor. And you find that pretty much in every religious tradition. Let's find the blazon. My beloved is white and ruddy, which don't seem to go together, the chiefest among 10,000. His head is at the most fine gold. Oh, there we go, head gold. His locks are bushy and black as a raven. His eyes are the eyes of doves by the rivers of waters. I mean, have you ever seen doves' eyes? They're kind of beady. Washed with milk and fitly set. So he doesn't just wash with water, he washes with milk. His cheeks are as a bed of spices, as sweet flowers. His lips are like lilies, dropping sweet-smelling myrrh. His hands are as gold rings set with beryl. His belly is as bright ivory, overlaid with sapphires. What does it the kids say today? Washboard. I think this is a little more poetic. Or a six-pack. My belly, if you will, looks like I drank a six-pack or two or several. His legs are as pillars of marble, set upon sockets of fine gold. His countenance is as Lebanon, excellent as the cedars. So he's tall, right? His mouth is most sweet, yea, he is altogether lovely. And you know, before modern dental hygiene, having good breath was a rarity and something you would look for in a lover. Let's see. Okay, here we go. This is him to her. Your hair, thy hair, is as a flock of goats that appear from Gilead. So I don't know. Your date picks you up and says, "Ah, your hair, it's so lovely, like a flock of goats." It sounds like Borat, right? So cultural things change. Thy teeth are as a flock of sheep that go up from the washing. Wherever one beareth twins, there is not one barren among them. So what's he saying about her teeth? That they look like sheep, a flock of sheep. Not that they're fuzzy, let's hope. But that each teeth is a twin and matches up with another tooth. So she's not missing any teeth. It's a big turn on in the ancient world to not be missing any teeth. Time you get grown, most people are missing a few, you know. A piece of pomegranate are thy temples within thy locks. I hope it doesn't mean lumpy, but rather red. Well, we don't know. There are 80 queens, 80 concubines, and virgins without number. My dove, my undefiled, is but one. She is the only one of her mother. She is the choice one of her that bare her. The daughter saw her and blessed her, yea, the queens and concubines, and they praised her. So yeah, I've got, 300 wives and 1,000 concubines, but she's my favorite, at least this week. It's kind of hard for Solomon to masquerade as a young swain besought with love. Okay, any questions on Song of Solomon and the way that blazons work? We'll see those coming along from time to time, all the way down to Shakespeare, which is a few weeks off. But the first time we read Romeo and Juliet, the first time we see Romeo, he's writing a poem. I think it's more full of oxymorons. And boy, it's some bad poetry. Like Shakespeare was writing poetry in the voice of a 16-year-old love-struck kid. And so he lowered his standards a bit. Okay, guys who are into, women who are into hunting deer. This is a deer hunting poem, only it's not just about hunting deer. Whoso lists to hunt, I know where is and hind, and that would be a female deer, like a doe. But as for me, alas, I may no more. Oh, wait, we're missing something. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Okay, this is a 14-line poem. Oh, and now we are going to start getting into meter. So be paying attention to meter for the quizzes. Whoso lists to hunt, I know where is and hind. Oops, that's 11. But who knows how they pronounce some of this stuff. But as for me, alas, I may no more. Okay, that's 10. The vain travail hath wearied me so sore. So bop, 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 bop. The emphasis is on the second beat. There are 10 syllables. That means there are 5 measures, which makes it pentameter. And emphasis on the second means it's iambic pentameter, the favorite English line. And if you have no other idea, if you're just totally blank on a poem identifying meter, then your default guess, if it's just a complete guess, is iambic pentameter. But this is, it's not woo-woo. It's very straightforward, very low-level English math. So we got iambic pentameter, 14 lines, hind, more, sore, a hind. So A, B, B, A. Mind for, therefore, wind or wind, C, D, D, C. So we've got a specific rhyme scheme going. What do we call a poem like this, these 14-line poems? Bueller. Lady leave. Okay, so it's 14 lines, iambic pentameter, ABBA. We call this a sonnet. I hope you're asleep and not just totally unfamiliar with the sonnet. Let's see, what did I say in my notes? Well, let's get a new slide. Let's see, insert text box. Now let's go back to this. I'm going to show you how a sonnet works. Oh, crap. Okay, where do we single space this stuff? It says single. Let's try this. Oh, good. Don't think about intake. Okay, so here's your basic structure of a sonnet. The first 8 lines are called the octet, meaning 8. The last 6 lines are called the sestet. And you break it down, and usually there's a big shift in tone between line 8 and 9. But also you further subdivide it into 2 quatrains at the top. And then in this kind of sonnet, there are sonnets that do 3s, which I want to say is triplets, but that doesn't sound right. You can do it into 2 3s, or you can do it in a quatrain and then end up with a 2-line couplet, which comes from the word couple, obviously. So let's see how this works. Whoso lists to hunt, I know where is an hind, but as for me, alas, I may no more. The vain travail hath wearied me so sore, I have them that farthest cometh behind. So imagine you go hunting with your old fat English professor and you're running the dogs through the woods after the deer, and I'm like 2 miles behind the rest of you sitting on a log out of breath. Well, that's this guy. But he's not talking about a literal deer. He's talking about Anne Boleyn. He had a moment with her, but she was busy working her way to the top. You sleep with the knight, and then you sleep with the earl, then you sleep with lord, and then the king you catch the king's eye, and pretty soon you're married to him, and then he kills you. So that's kind of the course for a woman at court. And now that she's on to better things like Caesar, if you see in the second from bottom line, that means King Henry VIII. Then she's not paying any attention to him anymore, and he's just lagging way behind. Yet may I by no means my wearied mind. So this is a shift, see? So in the first one, I'm running behind, trying to keep up, just can't do it. But the rest of you guys go on ahead. Second quatrain, I can't stop thinking about her. I can't my wearied mind draw from the deer, but as she fleeth afore, fainting I follow. I leave off, therefore, citherns in a net. I seek to hold the wind. So I've got a net, I'm trying to hold the wind. That's like trying to hold back Anne Boleyn when she's got Henry VIII in her sights. And citherns. I guess that means since. Okay, now a major shift to the last 6 lines. We repeat the first line. Whoso her hunt, I put him out of doubt, as well as I may spend his time in vain. So let me tell you, fella, before you go running after Anne Boleyn, it's a fool's errand. You're not going to get anywhere, and you might get killed. Engraven with diamonds and letters plain, there is written her fair neck round about, Nole me tangere, for Caesar's I am, and wild to hold, though I seem tame. So she seemed pretty tame when she was with me, but not anymore. Nola me tangere means don't touch me. So, hunting is kind of a fundamental core right as an American to hunt. And that's because partly when they were in England, they could not hunt, not if you're a normal person. There are too many English people and too few animals, and they'd all be dead in a week. So only the upper classes got to hunt. And they would have, I don't know if they put Latin signs up or just no trespassing. Yeah, it seems like they could put up a Latin sign. No, let me tangere, don't touch me, because I belong to Caesar. So the deer in Caesar's garden or park or woods would belong to Caesar. You couldn't hunt them. And so it is that Anne Boleyn belongs to Caesar now, and you better stay away if you know what's good for you. Don't be an idiot. All right, so do you remember the Wheel of Fortune? We talked about it when we talked about King Arthur. He was being toppled from the top of the Wheel of Fortune down into this pit of snakes. And Thomas Wyatt is talking about that happening to him, except with his love life instead of with battles on the field. So this is not a sonnet. And when he was popular at court, he was popular with the ladies. But having had a thing with Anne Boleyn made him somewhat less popular when the king got with her. And so everybody's staying away from him, including the women that used to come barefoot, stalking him in his chamber. They flee from me that sometime did me seek with naked foot, stalking in my chamber. I have seen them gentle, tame, meek, that are now wild and do not remember. They sometime put themselves in danger to take bread at my hand, and now they range busily seeking with a continual change. So they don't want to be around me anymore. What happened? Partly getting unpopular, the usual things. Certainly help when you go bald and get fat. That's what I hear anyway. Thank it be fortune, it hath been otherwise. So Fortuna, the wheel has turned. I'm now down here where the ladies are concerned. And by the way, with King Henry VIII too, I was up here and all the women wanted me. 20 times better, but once in special guise, in thin array, after a pleasant guise, when her loose gowns from her shoulders did fall, and she caught me in her arms long and small, which means narrow in this case. Therewithal sweetly did me kiss, and softly said, "Dear heart, how like you this?" And we're thinking, oh yes, he hath liked it. It was no dream. But now with all this newfangledness, she's got to go after other people. So these newfangled kids and just not being what they were before. Okay, my lute. Okay, this is his. I'm not going to go through this whole thing. He's singing to his lute. A lute is kind of a broke-back guitar. But people still play them. And like a guitar, it's seen as a sexy instrument, not like the accordion. Although in Louisiana, we can make the accordion really hot. Or the French horn, which is what I played, and that's a huge lute. And they're mostly more guitar-sized. Here we go. Here he is saying goodbye to his lute because they don't like his songs anymore. Oh, can we play a lute? Can y'all hear that?
Yes, sir.
All right. Okay, that's not bad. But it's just not working for him anymore. Maybe he was never that great a singer. But he keeps telling him this lute goodbye even while the thing goes on for verse after verse. But he's done because it's not working anymore and he's just putting it away. And then finally, stand whoso list. So instead of the wheel of fortune, this time it's the mountain of fortune. And the further up the mountain you go, the steeper it gets and the slipperier it gets. Stand whoso list upon the slipper top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Only 10 lines to this one. Slippery top of courts, estates, and let me here rejoice. Now, where is here? And use me quiet without letter, stop unknown in court that has such brackish joys in hidden place. So let my days forth pass, that when my years be done without noise, I may die aged after the common trace. Good Lord, how long is this sentence? Okay, we're going to break it up. So the Epicurean philosophy goes back to ancient Rome. And one idea that the Epicureans, well, they had the basic insight that pleasure is good and pain is bad. But they looked around at the hedonists that saw the same thing, and the hedonist is maximizing your pleasure every day just to get the most pleasure you possibly can out of life all the time. I'm saying, well, you wind up, sick and in a gutter and dead at 40 because you fried your liver. So they were about moderation, which is fairly typical for a Greek philosophy. It was a Greek and Roman philosophy. But among other things, the Epicureans encouraged retirement. And the nice thing about being rich is you do not have to wait until you're old to retire. You can retire right now. So court, with its ups and downs, with its frustrations, it seems like the best thing he liked about court was the women. And once the women stopped noticing him, what was the point anymore? He's just getting Henry VIII pissed off every time he sees him. So maybe if I slink off to my country estate, where they have brackish joys, and brackish water is kind of your slow flowing, bayous might be considered a bit brackish, where life is slow. So court life is interesting, there's stuff going on, but it can get too much, it can get overwhelming, and you can get dead. If I'm way out here in the country, yeah, I'm missing out on all the stuff, but nobody's noticing me, and I can live a long time without being attacked. So as long as you're going up that slippery slope of the mountain at court, the people behind you pulling you down and people above you pushing you down, and it can't end well. Okay. So he doesn't want to die dazed with dreadful fate. What did happen to old Thomas Wyatt? So many of them lost their heads. It's hard to keep up. 1542. Wow, he lived 39 years. So he retired when he was like 35. Didn't say he got executed. Oh, he was imprisoned on charges of adultery. Yeah, there we go. I knew something had happened. But he managed to hold on to his neck. Charged again in 1541. He just had a time of it. But he managed to die of natural causes at the ripe old age of 39 years old. All right, any questions about the Renaissance or Sir Thomas or whatnot?
You haven't been paying attention?
No, I have. But I think all cooking should look like the Fraggle Rock.
All right, well, we got the Fraggles going for us. Anything else?
No.
All right. Well, let's stop the recording.